A man dies and goes to heaven. Of course, St. Peter meets him at the pearly gates. And St. Peter says, here's how it works. You need 100 points to make it into heaven. You tell me all the good things that you've done, and I'll give you a certain number of points for each item, depending on how good it was. And when you reach 100 points, then you get in. Okay, the man says, I was married to the same woman for 50 years and I never cheated on her, even in my heart. That's wonderful, says St. Peter. That's worth 3 points. 3 points, he says. Well, I attended church all my life, and I supported its ministry with my tithe and my service. Terrific, says St. Peter. That's certainly worth a point. 1 point? Golly, man. All right, how about this? I started a soup kitchen in the city, and I worked in a shelter for homeless veterans. Fantastic. That's good for 2 more points, he says. 2 points, the man cries. At this rate, the only way I get into heaven is by the grace of God. Exactly, son. Come on in, he says. I know it wasn't much of a laughing joke, but I think it gets the point of grace. So in my message from this past Sunday, which, as we talked, I'm going to start with our home groups sharing and expounding on the message from the week before. And this one's a little bit different because I gave the message. So we're going to talk about some different things, not just that I'm regurgitating what I said on Sunday. And so in the message, I shared that I've decided to talk on grace this time because I've talked a lot about God's truth, and there's a lot of scripture about the grace and the truth of Christ, and they're both equally important. And I've shared a lot how important it is for us to live the truth of Christ and what God gives us as commandments, and we need to be honor those. But I want to look at grace, and I want to look at a different story than what I looked at. I talked about the story of David and Bathsheba on Sunday, but I want to share another story that I almost read on Sunday because it's so good on grace. And you all know, right? So let's look at Luke 15. And I want to give you a preface to the story that we're going to talk about because so much of this chapter has to do with Jesus doing this. So Jesus says, now the tax collectors and the sinners were all gathered around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, they muttered because, here again, they didn't like Jesus. They were trying to find fault to get him in trouble. This man welcomes sinners and he eats with them. He's going to get sinner cooties. Can you imagine this? Well, then Jesus told him this parable. The story is of Jesus. He talks about the lost sheep and the lost coin. And what we're going to look at today is the lost son, often known as the prodigal son. So Jesus continued. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Dad, give me all of your share of the estate. It's like, I want to go live my life, right? I want to go do what I want to do. I'm tired of living under your rules. I'm tired of living under your commands. Let me go live the life that I want. And the funny thing is, I looking back at my life, I kind of did this myself. I left my Christian household. I want to do my own thing, so I get this. So he, the father, he divided his property between them as he had planned. Well, not long after that, we don't know how long. I mean, here again, this is a story that Jesus is sharing. But not long after that, the younger son got together all that he had and set off for a distant country. And there he squandered all the wealth in wild living. I mean, we could probably look at a lot of, we see this with athletes, I think, all the time, and movie stars, because they get so much wealth and they go spend it all, and you get used to spending it all, and if it stops coming in, then you're kind of lost. Well, he had all this wealth, he had this incredible inheritance, he wants to live it up, but no money's coming in. Well, after he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So it's not something he could predict. He didn't know there was going to be a famine. Maybe he had planned that he would have enough to last, but that's not how it worked out. So he went out and hired himself as a citizen of that country, who sent him to his field to feed the pigs. Imagine this. Guy had it all. Now he's feeding the pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating. That's how bad it was. He just wanted to eat what they were eating. That's how hungry he was, but no one gave him anything. And Jesus went on. When he came to his senses, he said, what in the world am I doing? How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? I mean, my goodness, even at my house, there were so many people that worked for my dad that had everything they wanted. And look at me now. I'm starving to death right here. I'm going to do this. I'm going to set out. I'm going to go back to my dad. I'm going to say, Father, I know I've sinned against you. I've sinned against you and heaven and earth. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Just do this. Will you make me like one of your hired servants? Just let me have that, because I know I don't deserve to be your son. But he thought, my dad, I think, will go for this. I think I can convince him to this. Maybe he'll have some mercy on me. So he got up and went out to seek his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled for compassion for him. I love this line because I can imagine the father. Remember, his son left him, said he wanted nothing to do with him. So did the dad give up on him? I think a lot of us as loving parents say, no, you want your child to come back no matter how long it takes. And I think the dad was out there with his binoculars every day. Is he coming yet? Is he coming yet? And so from a long, far away, he saw him coming. And so what does he do? But then he ran to his son. And this is something I learned a number of years ago. Jewish men back there didn't run. There was no jogging back in the olden days. This was not a thing yet. Well, I don't even know why it's the thing now, but this was not a thing. But he ran to his son and he threw his arms around him and he kissed him. He didn't care, right? His son was coming back. He didn't care what he looked like, how foolish it looked like to other people. And the son said to him, just like he had planned, right? He had it rehearsed. Maybe he even looked on his phone for notes, like you do we just had at a wedding, people looking at their phone for notes. He goes, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But I think the father just interrupted him, just said, stop. The father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe that you have, put it on my son, put a ring on his finger, and put the sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it, because you know what? We're going to have a feast, and we are going to celebrate. Why? For this son of mine was dead, but now he's alive again. He was lost, and now he's found, so they begin to celebrate. I mean, think about that. I love this image because Jesus, just like he does and in the questions, we're going to kind of look at the other stories as well, the lost coin and the lost sheep. And this is the same way that Jesus is showing the Pharisees and all the people listening that God is there, never giving up on us, no matter how far away we are. He always is searching to bring us home to be with him forever. And really, if you think about it, if we imagine grace in modern times like today, it's kind of like crashing your dad's car. Think about if you crashed your dad's car and then wasting all of his money and then showing up years later smelling like garbage, only for him to give you the keys to another brand new car and say, dinner's ready. It makes no sense by human standards that a dad would do that, but that's the point. Grace is unreasonable in a good way. A few years ago, John Gilbert died at the age of 25 at his home in Paradise, California. When he was 5 years old, John was diagnosed with Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. That meant that during the course of his few years, John had progressively lost more and more of the physical abilities that normally characterize the lives of young men. See, school had been tough for John. So was the task of making friends. But along the way, he became an articulate reporter of his inner life. And even though sometimes he could barely muster the strength to move the mouse on his computer, John became California's spokesman for his form of muscular dystrophy. That opened the doors to opportunities. It also got him a seat at a special fundraiser auction and dinner sponsored by the National Football League. And here's what happened that night in the words of author and pastor John Ortberg. He said, when the auction began, one item particularly caught John's attention. A basketball signed by the players of the Sacramento Kings professional team. Well, John got a little carried away because when the ball was up for bid, he raised his hand. As soon as the hand went up, John's mother flagged it down. In John's words, astronauts never felt as many G's as my wrist that day in raising my hand. The bidding for the basketball rose to an astonishing amount for an item that was not the most valuable treasure on the docket. Eventually, one man named a figure that shocked the whole room and that no one else could match. The man went to the front, collected his prize, but instead of returning to his seat, the man walked across the room, placed it in the thin, small hands of the boy who had admired it so intently. The man placed the ball in the hands that would never dribble it down a court, would never throw it to a teammate on a fast break, never fire it from the three-point range, but those hands would cherish it. John Gilbert later wrote, "It took me a moment to realize what he had done. I remember hearing gasps all around the room, then thunderous applause, and seeing weepy eyes. To this day, I'm amazed. Have you ever been given a gift you could never have gotten for yourself? Has anyone ever sacrificed a huge amount for you without getting anything in return except for just the joy of giving? Have you ever been given a gift you could never have gotten by yourself? As a matter of fact, everything you have ever received falls into that category. God owns everything, but He graciously shares all good things. We need to be grateful, be thankful, and whenever you can, pass God's best stuff on to someone else. So something I mentioned on Sunday, why do so many of us struggle receiving God's grace? Because I think a lot of us do. I believe many of us struggle to accept the grace because we believe that we haven't earned it, right? We don't deserve God's grace for some of the things we've done in the past, or that we're not worthy of it, often due to feelings of guilt or shame or a strong sense of fairness. So the two key points that I want to bring out, as I did on Sunday in the message, that we need to remember. Number one, God will always give you more grace than you could ever imagine or that you deserve. God will always forgive you. He will always give you grace that you don't deserve. In fact, that really was the point. If you heard my message on Sunday, I loved the analogy, the description that I gave the last part of the sermon, because to me, that shows God's grace. And the judge who takes the place in the jail cell of the person who committed the crime. That's what God does and did for us. Secondly, just as important, we as Christians, we are called to give that same grace to people around us. We have to give that back because that's what God commands us. That's what's going to show who Christ is in our life. So again, what is grace? It's the mind-numbing discovery that God is willing to give to us for free what we can never purchase for ourselves. Have a great week.
Like and subscribe.